Welcome to the third video in our series on the solutions on exercise or assignment number 9 in our course Competition, Policy and Strategy. Now this exercise deals with a few terms and concepts that we want to clarify and discuss, right? In the first concept we want to talk about is RPM, resale price maintenance. So what is meant by RPM and how is RPM treated under EU law? We already talked about RPM in this assignment actually, because we saw a version of RPM in the second exercise where we modeled a situation where an upstream producer can fix the price of a retailer that the retailer is asking from the consumer. So we already saw a version of RPM. So let's now, formulate a definition of RPM and, in addition to that, talk about how RPM is treated under EU law. So RPM is, or under RPM, we understand a situation where upstream and downstream firms agree on the consumer's price. This agreement, this restraint of competition, falls under core restrictions of Article 101 TFEU, so the tariff on the functioning of the European Union, and are thus prohibited. So there are, in general, there are prohibited. Only way to circumvent this prohibition is if the firm can argue that there is efficiency gains. So Article 101 Section 3 allows for arguing for efficiency gains that result from a restriction of competition. So in general, RPM is prohibited unless firm can argue for efficiency gains. Next, let's talk about or describe the difference between inter-brand and intra-brand competition. Inter-brand means competition between different brands of a may or may not differentiated good. For example, Pepsi versus Coca-Cola. And how far these products are homogeneous or heterogeneous is up to you to decide. Nevertheless, we have different brands offering more or less close substitutes, right? And the competition between these more or less close substitutes is called inter-brand competition, between brand competition. Intra-brand competition or within brand competition describes a situation where describes competition between the same brand on the downstream level. So we have different vendors or retailers offering products of the same brand and competing with products or on products of the same brand. One example would be we have a 1 liter Pepsi in store A for 50 cents and then there is a 1 liter bottle of Pepsi Cola in store B for 45 cents. And of course, intra-brand is where RPM may come into interest, because RPM or intra-brand is the one version where RPM can prevent competition, right? RPM, again, the producer of a good is setting the retail price. That implies that it is concerning goods from the same brand, from the same producer, right? All right. Now, in the context of intra-brand competition, we are asked to describe a free riding problem that may arise and how this can be solved by some vertical agreement. So the idea is, and we already saw this in a previous exercise on services, when there is a homogeneous good, and there's several retailers offering this same good, which of course can be understood as intra-brand competition, multiple retailers offering the same good from the same producer, which is exactly the setting we were covering earlier, we can see that there will be some positive externalities from offering services, for example, customer advisory services, accompanying the good. Because these additional services, these advisory services, can be thought as to increase demand for this product. And as we saw earlier, if there is intra-brand competition, these positive external effects are not internalized, at least in part. So, one way to make a story out of this would be just consider there's two firms, firm A and firm B. This firm A is offering some customer advisory services, and because this comes at a cost, firm A has also to ask for a slightly larger price than firm B, because firm B is deciding to not offer these customer advisory services, thereby cutting these costs and thereby able to ask for a lower price. Well, then of course we have this free riding problem where firm B has an advantage by firm A providing services, providing this customer advisory services, and then consumers switching to buy from firm B because the price is lower. That's the free riding problem that may arise from intra-brand competition. So, in the result, customers use the advisory service from some firm A, but then continue to buy from firm B, which of course is the same story that all of you probably have heard when it comes to online retail. The story of people going into the brick and mortar stores, getting their services, their advisory services, and then buying online because it's cheaper. Now, the result from this would be that in the long run, no firm is able to offer these services because services come at a cost and costs increase prices, right? So in the long run, the best strategy for all firms would be to not offer any services. Now, how can vertical agreement help us solve this issue? One possible solution would be resale price maintenance. Because, and again, just after reading this, reconsider the previous exercise in this on this assignment on services, where we analyzed the situation where there was RPM and where we saw that the amount of services provided increased under RPM. Right? Just revisit these results with this more qualitative approach in mind. Under RPM, firms prevent competition over prices between the retailers. So on the downstream level, there is no competition anymore. And in this situation, if firm B also wants to sell any product, well, then they would have to offer services, because if firm A is offering services, firm B doesn't, the price is the same. Of course, consumers will prefer to buy from firm A, where they get services and still pay the same price. Right, so under RPM, the idea would be that firm B needs to offer services themselves in order to attract consumers. Otherwise, they would all buy from firm A.